Hi, I'm Mike Pert, champion of future fitness for leaders, and I'm joined on the couch today by Verity Price from TAP. Maybe you can explain what TAP is for us, Verity.
TAP is TAP Results, and it's Think, Act, Produce. So in order to create team alignment processes in businesses, I help them think properly so that they can act correctly so they can produce the results they want.
Jeez, that sounds a lot harder than you've just made it.
It is hard, but I just like the idea that you're going and tapping potential, tapping people's positivity, tapping their strategic, innovative thinking. So it's this idea of let's get in there and tap what's there to be tapped.
That's amazing. I mean, we're seeing with the work that we do how organizations, and particularly leaders in organizations, need to change their behavior.
Yeah.
You know, and change their actions. It can't be about the rhetoric anymore. And that's the thing that's making the difference for those companies that are succeeding in the digital workplace. I mean, your experience, you work with a lot of leaderships, with a lot of global brands. What sort of stuff are you seeing there, and what sort of things are making the difference?
For me, Mike, the things that seem to really make a difference is when leadership understands that they need to change, when they kind of accept that they don't know all the answers, and they need to be comfortable stepping into that uncomfortable space of asking questions that don't have an answer yet. So I'm always very grateful when I go into those teams where they say, right, let's ask those uncomfortable questions, let's challenge the way we're currently doing things and go, is this the best way? Is there another way? And things they might take for granted, the way they're currently running a meeting, can we challenge that? Can we do it differently? Rather than waiting for someone else to innovate and go, here's how we do it. That learning to think about that and kind of anticipate those changes and make them for yourselves.
So how does, I mean, you said that you love going into organizations where they've already made that decision, you know, and they know that they need to change. What about those organizations that you're involved in and they're pulled in because they think they want to do it and they know they need to, but then, I mean, I'm assuming ego and all sorts of things sort of comes up.
So ego definitely plays a part, especially when we're trying to change the way we think, because our brain becomes very comfortable doing something in a certain way, and so change is very uncomfortable. For me, when I'm going in, I'm having to create a safe space so that they can kind of be comfortable making those new decisions. So often I have to do it through a little bit of, you know, a role play or an experience first that's got nothing to do with the business. And when they've challenged an assumption, something to do with a social issue or something that they take for granted, and they've seen that they could change their thinking, then I go, right, let's now look at the business and see if we've got similar assumptions that we could maybe challenge.
Okay, so, that makes sense. So change is the biggest thing that you're pushing them to do, is that acceptance of change. How do you then get that momentum going? Because I know from experience that you can go in with a rah-rah, have a great workshop, and then it's sort of 2 months later, or forget 2 months.
2 days.
2 days. That folder, all those worksheets that you had suddenly find their place on the back shelf, or they start on the desk, they move backwards. You know, how do you keep that momentum going? Because that's what's critical.
Yeah, and I think for a lot of facilitators and people that go in and consult in businesses, it's that frustration of knowing once you leave, it's going to get forgotten because life goes on as normal. So for me, I always try and encourage my clients to continue a journey, whether it's with me or whether it's, you know, I'm supporting from a distance. But the best place where I see change happening is when I'm with them every 2-3 months. And then they've got follow-up, whether it's, you know, videos or inspirational mails or an activity they need to do as a team that's not to do with working in the business, it's to do with working on the business.
Okay.
And trying to get teams to take that time out of the kind of the day-to-day of, you know, the little box of the present and go, right, let's spend some time designing the future, creating the future, and maybe letting go of the past. You've got to actually have an outside person driving that, because the people that are doing the day-to-day business, they're going to put it off, you know, that's important but not urgent. Yeah.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
What are some of the maybe the attributes? Because I mean, leadership is we know great leaders of the past, and those attributes are carefully documented. They're studied. I mean, great leaders have always looked at other great leaders, but we're living in this time now where the pace of change is just unprecedented, and there are some new features that leaders are going to have to take on board. You know, features is probably the wrong word. Attributes, you know, that they're going to have to take on board in order to keep up with that pace. What sort of things are you seeing as most challenging stuff that leaders are having to work on, that they're struggling most with maybe?
So I think the attributes that leaders need now more than ever, there's a few things that I see, and the one is being open. being open to that you might not have the answer and that the answer might lie within your organization. Often we're looking outside for consultants or, someone to come in and tell us the answer, as opposed to asking lower down the ranks and going, have you guys got an idea or a solution? And you hear amazing stories where they've spent the money outside, and it was a toothpaste company in the States, spent $8 million with consultants working out a problem in their production line because empty boxes were going to the stores. Very expensive problem. Couldn't solve the problem. They had to put a scale at the end of the conveyor belt to catch empty boxes. That was their $8 million solution. And 2 months later, we don't hear the alarm go off when it hits the scale, what's happened. And one of their staff had put a $20 Walmart fan 5 meters up the line to just blow empty boxes off the conveyor belt. So you have to go look for the answer in your organization and believe that they can figure it out. So when you've got your team in a thinking space and you're trying to solve a problem, leaders need to be comfortable sitting back and letting the answers emerge from sometimes the quieter people in the team. So being able to let other people find their own voice is kind of counterintuitive, because you feel as the leader you should have the answer. But maybe not knowing sometimes allows other people to find that answer for you.
Well, I think that's half the problem with leadership that we see. You're being paid, and you're being paid to be the person that comes up with the solutions. And I think that's a whole other debate on the difference between leadership and management.
Yeah.
Structures are put in place. The manager has to look after what is going on below. And what we're asking for now in today's world is leaders who can inspire and allow things to come out of everyone else. I mean, that's an innovation culture. The trickiness is the structures that I see that are in place that just don't allow for it. And it's a brave decision from the guy at the top to say, we're going to let go a little bit here. We need to, in order to move forward. And I think that's some of those challenges that come through. With the stuff that you do, are you finding that the CEOs and the CFOs are backing the visions that you're creating and that change that you're trying to make happen in organizations? With the Wonga, are they coming up with the money to put it out, or is it still just rhetoric?
I'm lucky. I tend to work with businesses where that buy-in comes from the top. Often the frustration is if you do get brought in at a middle level where there's a department that's wanting to change something, and then there's that sense of helplessness. What if they don't buy into this? So if I'm lucky, you start at the top, and then I'm allowed to do that same process departmentally, so that they can hear the visions that are emerging from each department, not just one big group vision, like, where do we all want to go, and is there alignment in the business? But then people it needs to be visible, so they need to feel that it wasn't just a nice, kind of 2-day breakaway and where is it going? So it needs to be visible. They need to see it. You need to, create it, that they're reminding it, and that they're hearing how they're doing, that they're kind of tracking their progress.
You've hit on one thing there that piques my interest around the idea of working with the department. A lot of organizations work very much in silo. Okay. Now, one of the things that technology and digital brings is a huge amount of information. Yes, sometimes too much for a lot of organizations. But the ability to see the impact of what one silo is doing on another silo. Because the reality is that organizations aren't in silo. They're living, breathing organisms. So how are you seeing leaders approach that idea of, well, you've got HR, you've got finance here, you've got IT here, and bringing all of those guys together? Are you seeing how they're changing things to make that happen?
So some businesses are getting it right, and some businesses are doing business as normal. Where I see it working well is if they do even things like a yearly annual project that uses cross-functional teams, where they give them a broader business issue, but you're getting someone from each department to now create a team and work together and have 3-4 months really getting to understand each other and get the different inputs. But you've also got to have real vision to drive that, because it's taking them out of their business function and it's working on something broader. But when it works well, they end up with innovation that they can use.
And it's the only way. If you don't start, we spoke about hierarchy and structure, and that is important. That still keeps the lights on, right?
Yeah.
But unless you can start to move people away to a different way of working, it's that difference between a large organization, the way it's structured in order to succeed and see the benefits of economies of scale, and that startup, where the CEO sweeps the floors and they just get involved. It's a network as opposed to and it's well written, it's well documented. There's some great stories out there as to how that succeeded. But that's a great starting point to see, take a project, as you say, and allow that to be your little incubator for not just potential change within the organisation, but cultural change.
Yeah.
You start to accept those sort of things. I think that's.
Yeah.
I think
And
that's
it has to happen through action and experience. But I had a recent thing happen with clients where one of the departments was complaining about, they always complain about silos and no one recognizes us and they don't appreciate us. And my job is to disrupt their thinking. So I listened to that and I could hear there was a lot of discomfort in this department. And so I kind of reflected it back to them, what do you need to do to be valued by the other departments? And they came up with 2 or 3 radical ideas that gave them a sense of, we're not a victim of this anymore. We're sitting waiting for them to see us. Actually, here's 3 ways that we could interact with another department and create value. And so it's also, you've got to go in and get people out of this complaint cycle, because it's the one thing I've seen is the biggest convenience in business, is we feel like we've had a productive meeting if we sat for an hour and complained about everyone else is not doing their job.
Yeah.
Instead of asking a new question and go, how can we fix it?
Yeah. Why isn't this done? Oh, it's his fault.
Yeah.
They didn't do it. It's a blame culture. And it happens everywhere. It happens in small businesses as much.
It happens in relationships. It's everywhere.
That's a whole different conversation. Maybe we should go to that later. I don't know. Look, I think there's an underlying thing we've spoken about. You've spoken about optimism being important. We've spoken about structures. We've spoken about teams becoming responsible. But there's an underlying thread that I'm hearing from there, and I see it with the people that I work with as well, is that the leaders need to be more self-reflective.
Yeah.
They need to take time away from the business. I'm not talking about working on the business and in the business. I'm talking about themselves and work on themselves. I mean, is that something that your guys and girls are taking up in these organisations? That self-reflection.
It's a really interesting question, because it's not something that is necessarily overt. But I do a lot of work around positive mindset, and I'll go into businesses and I talk on positive psychology and the effect of gratitude and appreciation and kindness and what it does to people's results. It's kind of, there's a bottom line reflection. When that's working well in your business and in your life, you get better results. Yeah. And it's often after a talk like that I will have kind of a high-ranking leader come and say to me, I think I need coaching. I'm realizing that I'm not using enough appreciation in my team. I've been driving them too hard and I need to work out why I do that. So it's not something I necessarily see very often, but when leaders take that responsibility, when they start going, let me look at my side of the street and see which bits I might need to clean up so that I can lead more effectively, that teams feel that. And I think, I know people really appreciate vulnerability and that ability to kind of own your dark and your light, and instead of having to always look like you've got all the answers, being able to sometimes say, I don't know, I'm figuring this out. But that's a big step when the ego believes that a leadership role requires that you have all the answers.
Verity, thanks so much for coming in. I think there was a lot there that we could explore in a lot more depth. I think there's some underlying things there for leadership. That idea of just reflecting a little bit more, understanding that they are potentially the blockage. Coming through, and that they have to take that first step in order of accepting that they are the change that needs to happen, and then making that change happen and following up with action. What does TAP stand for again?
Think, act, produce.
Exactly. Think, act, produce. That's a perfect ending to the show. And I look forward to all leaders thinking, acting, producing, and becoming future fit.
Awesome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.